The Weekend Warriors Draft Special is brought to you by Bud Light. No easier way to enjoy your Sunday. Bud Light is the official beer of the NFL and a proud partner of the Carolina Panthers. It is time for the Linebackers episode as we lead you into the NFL Draft. We're going to have the greatest Panther linebacker, maybe the greatest Panther of all time, Luke Kuechly, join us later in the show. Boy, if we get a linebacker who thinks and plays like Luke, we're in really good shape.
Yeah.
But we're also going to hit a couple of guys that we did not hit in the episode where we talk about edge rushers and defensive line, guys like Jalen Walker, guys like Mikael Williams, guys who can fit multiple roles in a defense. Anish Shroff, Tom Luginbill with you. Tom's an ESPN analyst, covers college football, national director of recruiting, so he has seen a lot of these prospects from the time that they were in high school. Panthers pick 8th overall. The prevailing sentiment is they're going to go defense. Mm-hmm. They need help on the front seven. So let's start with a guy whose name has been associated with Carolina and that 8th pick, and that's Jalen Walker. At Georgia, he seems to be just a really good scheme fit in a 3-4 defense, doesn't he?
Well, and when you say scheme fit, it's the scheme versatility in the sense of playing off the ball, playing on the ball, playing wide on the ball. To me, a guy like him he's a chess piece, and you could place him here, place him there, and you got to find out where he's located and identify him every time you come to the line of scrimmage. And I think those guys put so much pressure on you offensively. And now with the way defenses have started to play, we don't have traditional quote-unquote defensive ends anymore. We now kind of call them edges, and they may not have their hand on the ground, and sometimes they do have their hand on the ground. But I think he's the most well-rounded of the group that's out there on the draft boards.
And, oh, by the way, from Salisbury, North Carolina native, so that's a homecoming. The other guy who has drawn comparisons to a former Panther and a pretty good one, Mikael Williams has drawn Frankie Louvu comparisons as another guy that you can kind of move around the field. He can come after the quarterback. He can fit the run. You're comfortable leaving him in coverage. And again, in a 3-4 defense where so much of it is based on disguising what you want to do, you talk about a chess piece, that's another chess piece.
It's another chess piece, and I think the question with Mikael Williams is how far has he come since his true freshman year? And is the productivity there to the level it should be when you consider he was a starter as a true freshman? Really, was like everybody, I think at the time I remember going, whoa, okay, this guy's going to be a real handful. But then did he end up turning into what Abdul Carter has turned into, or even Jalen, as you mentioned, has turned into? And the answer is probably no. So now you start asking more questions.
And with him, again, he's a Georgia guy. And recency bias is at play. But you just watched what Philly did. Right. All those Georgia guys on defense, they won a Super Bowl. Is there something to be said about the pedigree of that program and the defensive players that they've produced under Kirby Smart?
Yeah, I think that there is a standard and an expectation that you have to meet to get on the field at the University of Georgia, and everybody knows it because competition is not motivated by the coaches. It's motivated by the personnel, meaning that if I don't play well.
There's a 5-star waiting behind you.
He's right to my left and he's right to my right. So and Bobby Knight used to say the single greatest motivator is your ass on the bench, right? And so I think that when you come into pro football out of programs like that where there has been such a high level of performance standard that those guys are more ready because they're less surprised by anything that may come their way.
A couple other guys to hit on. Let's keep it in the SEC. Jihad Campbell out of Alabama.
Stud. I really like him. And he's almost an inside guy. I mean, he's big and he's physical and he can run. Terrific at the point of attack. I've actually been a little bit surprised that not that he's not being talked about, but a lot of the focus has been on Jalen Walker and some of the other guys at the position. I just think that he's got some stuff. And again, same type of thing, that pedigree you mentioned of meeting a standard and the expectation to perform consistently at a championship level. And the other thing too, and with Jihad Campbell, is that defense, and whether you want to take it back to Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, now Kirby Smart, and all the different branches that have come off of that tree, you can't be a dumb football player and perform well in that defense. You have to have a high football IQ, you have to be able to process quickly, and you have to be able to communicate. And when that is something that you can prove you can do and do it at a high level, the learning curve is much less steep when you move on to the National Football League.
We start looking at guys like a Campbell, who's a borderline first, second-round pick most likely, and then you get later in the draft. The Panthers seem to have found a promising one in Trevin Wallace a year ago, third-rounder out of Kentucky, was thrown into the fire. But I'll give you a name, a guy that I saw at Oklahoma, and it's easy to go Bosworth with Danny Stutzman.
Danny Stutzman, yeah.
Kind of has the hair.
Yep.
Has the personality, but he's a hair-on-fire type of player.
Yeah. He actually, to be honest with you, if you look at him and you just watch and you see him, you kind of think of Luke, right? Like there's some similarities. The tough, rugged, always kind of has a nose for the ball, knows where to go, doesn't take false steps. I think he studies the game, all of those, especially at linebacker. I mean, if you're not in tune with what's happening in front of you and knowing the game, you're not going to maximize your production.
The running joke has been the Panthers have never drafted a player out of Clemson. What about a Barrett Carter, who you saw covering the ACC quite a bit this year?
Didn't have the year this past fall that he had the previous 2 seasons. I just think he's a really good football player, like well-rounded. You know exactly what you're going to get. You're going to have no issues with him. A pro's pro, a lot of pride in his game. He can rush the passer. I think that's really, really important, and I think he'll be an unbelievable teams guy.
Cody Simon is somebody we saw at Ohio State. Again, loaded defense. There's a lot of playmakers on that defense, and maybe doesn't always get the attention as JTT or a Jack Sawyer up front. But, again, watching him in that college football playoff always seemed to be right place, right time.
Carson Schlesinger at UCLA and Jack Kaiser at Notre Dame are all kind of in that same boat, right? What you see is what you get. Good production, solid football player. May not be elite in any one area, but just good player. And, I think that sometimes it's not a bad thing to get overlooked because of the other players around you, because the next thing you know, people start digging in on the tape more on you as a result, right? And that can – could it hurt you? Yes. I think in most cases it benefits you.
I'm going to throw one more name out there, and this was a guy that I saw a little bit at Oklahoma State. He was hurt this past season. 140 tackles the year before. You know where I'm going with this. Nick Martin.
Yeah.
Flew around the field, smaller guy, right? Doesn't have the prototypical size, closer to 220. Mm-hmm. I would imagine would have to throw on a little bit of weight. But when he was healthy, the production was off the charts. And to me, that position, middle linebacker, especially in a 3-4, if the guys up front are doing their job, you have opportunities to make tackles.
There's no question.
Like that's it, right?
See ball, get ball. I think, and you're right. Listen, he's about an inch and a half taller than Zach Thomas. So when you look at a guy like Zach Thomas and you look at a guy like Nick Martin, you're saying, okay, what is the end result? I don't care when you put forth 140 tackles, that's not just happening on ability. To me, that's happening on aptitude, meaning you're studying beforehand, you're prepared, and you know where the ball is going, and then you know how to get there. Like all of those things, I think there's some inherent traits there on high tackle guys that it's not just ability. There's something else going on.
Yeah, we're going to hear from Luke in a little bit.
Oh, prime example. And Luke was a notorious film study, great instincts. Yep.
Knew where the ball was going before it was snapped.
mean, just think about all the NFL film stuff with him where he's calling out where everything's going.
Peyton Manning on defense.
Exactly, right? But again, that doesn't come from physical attributes necessarily.
So do you look at that position in a lot of ways the way you would look at, evaluating a quarterback where because so much happens before the ball is snapped. I think we lose sight of that sometimes,
yes.
right? Like a great quarterback, when you talk to him, and you've said this to me too, as somebody who's played the position, you kind of need to know the menu before the ball's in your hand.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's the same on defense. I mean, think about it down in distance, personnel groupings, strength of the formation, and then the shifts, the motions, all of those things they're all happening before the ball's even snapped. And they're all being employed to try to get you as a defensive player to take one false step, to bring your eyes from here to there when they're not supposed to go over there, right? Do you have the discipline to not do that stuff? And your coaches talk about eye violations and wrong fits and all of that stuff. That stuff happens when you're not disciplined and you're not prepared.
Yeah, we get enamored, right, with arm strength and all this stuff sometimes with quarterbacks, and then it's the above the shoulders, the processing. I mean, Tom Brady coming out of college, arm strength was a negative.
Yeah.
People said that about Bryce Young too, where average arm strength, and then you kind of saw it in the second season, his ability to process and read a defense. Peyton Manning was never a big armed guy.
No.
That was Ryan Leaf.
You look at that draft, right? And if you would have asked any one of the 32 GMs at that time, who's the most physically gifted amongst Ryan Leaf and Peyton Manning, not one of them would have said Peyton Manning. Not one of them. But then from the neck up and all of the other things, then it was the complete opposite.
So is that the evaluation then for an inside linebacker?
I think so. I listen, I think there's a lot of guys that are going to be big enough, fast enough, strong enough, but we've talked, obviously, on this podcast about, do you love the game? The most important question you've got to get an answer to, and an honest answer to, when you're investigating these guys. But aptitude and processing at that position in the middle of the field, outside of the quarterback position and maybe the offensive center, it's as important as any position.
All right, we're going to talk to a guy who was as good as anyone at that, Luke Kuechly, in just a moment. We remind you, the Weekend Warriors Draft Special is brought to you by Bud Light. No easier way to enjoy your Sunday. Bud Light is the official beer of the NFL and a proud partner of the Carolina Panthers. You know him as a Panther legend, former Boston College Eagle, former 9th overall pick in 2012. Played in Super Bowl 50, 7-time Pro Bowler, 5-time first-team All-Pro, Defensive Player of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, future Hall of Famer. There he is, Luke Kuechly. Welcome, Luke.
It's good to be here. I come up to this room a lot, and you said a lot of nice things about me, so maybe I need to come back more often.
Well, now I may have to stop. So I got
running out of paper. That was a long list.
Running out of paper. We're running out of paper. Once he gets the gold jacket, that list gets even longer. But listen, we've been talking about linebackers on the show. We want to get into some edge guys, but before we get into any of that, I mean, we're sitting here on Sunday, we're watching the games, and one thing that was painfully obvious at times last year, Panthers really just didn't have any depth at that position, and now Shaq Thompson is gone. You got Josie Jewell, Trevin Wallace, and then kind of a bunch of question marks.
Yeah, I think you look at kind of going into the season last year, you felt good about Shaq and then Josie, offseason addition, felt good about them. And then you draft Trevin, who Dan really likes, size, speed, athletic ability, physical. And then Shaq goes down early in the season. Josie gets banged up. Trevin gets thrown in. Trevin played well in spots. Then Trevin gets hurt. And then before you know it, we're looking at the roster on Sundays, and you, Jake, and I are thinking, like, where did this guy come from? So, going into the offseason, Trevin obviously had the shoulder surgery, so he's going to be coming off that. Year two, the best thing I think that we have about our team going into this offseason, into next season, is everything's the same. Obviously, Dave's back, Canales is back for Bryce, and then on the defensive side of the ball, it's no longer a new system for anybody on the defense. Obviously, offseason additions, drafted guys, it'll be new for them. But for our guys, it's exactly the same, which is great. So Trevin won't have to relearn. But with that being said, I think Josie's our guy. Obviously, we know he's going to play a lot this year. And then what do we get from Trevin? How's his offseason going? How's his recovery doing? How does he show up in OTAs? It's going to be, I think, it goes without being said, we're going to pick up some pieces on the defensive side of the ball, especially off the ball linebackers. So how does he fit into that mix? Where does he belong? How does he compete? How does he take that challenge? I think he'll do a really good job with it. But I think here free agency obviously started, then the draft in April is answer a lot of questions.
You know, you talk about the linebacker position, and if the Panthers are sitting there at 8, and let's just say they don't trade down to get other picks, but you've got a difference maker, let's just say in the defensive front, that's available and on the board, where would you lean and why?
I think at that 8 spot, the one guy that gets thrown around a lot is Jalen Walker, the kid from Georgia. He's off the ball. He's on the ball. He can rush. Obviously played at a big-time system at Georgia. So I think he's the really only guy that would play off the ball that you could draft at 8. There's a couple other guys that we'll get to in a little bit that are really good players, but at 8, I don't know. But then there's names that are getting thrown around. I think Abdul Carter's gone, right?
Sure.
I think Mason Graham, the kid from kid from Michigan, would be a really solid piece. Obviously, Ashawn, Derek Brown, and then you add Mason Graham.
He's a problem.
You'd feel really good about it. I think there's a couple other guys, but the dudes that I think about at 8 are Mason Graham, Jalen Walker. Obviously, Abdul Carter's going to be gone. He's fun to watch. But in my opinion, if you're going to go up front or if you're going to go linebacker, those are the kind of guys that I'm thinking about right now.
And when you look at the history of this franchise, and you're a part of it, to me, the glamour position in the 30-year history of the Carolina Panthers, it's been middle linebacker, whether it was you or Sam Mills or John Beeson, whoever had been in there, Dan Morgan, right, Shaq Thompson up until recently. That has been kind of the position. You played it as well as anybody. When you kind of look at inside linebacker, take away the athleticism for a moment, just from shoulders up, what are you looking for?
I think the biggest thing with these guys is how well they process. How well can you process what's going on in front of you when the ball gets snapped? I think there's a lot of guys when you get them on the board and you talk to them like, hey, let's say Carson Swessinger, the kid from UCLA. You can put him on a board. You can have him draw everything up. You can talk about gap exchange. You can talk about run fits. You can talk about where guys go when, say, a guard pulls, where's your next available gap. All these guys can probably do that.
Yeah.
So that part, to me, the intelligence side is a different conversation. All these guys know what they're doing. But when the ball gets snapped, how quickly can they go, guard pull, I'm a B-gap player, now I'm an A-gap player. Boom, what happens when, it's a front side zone play and they bring the center around? It's called a wipe scheme. What happens when they bring him around? How quickly can he diagnose, process, and then ultimately get where he needs to get to? I think that's the biggest thing for me with these guys.
How can you find that out?
I think you watch them on tape, and how quickly do they react? I think, you watch guys on tape and you wonder, like, why isn't he going there? And then you go talk to him, and it's not that he doesn't know what he's doing. It's just he can't get there fast enough. So when you watch guys, I think the ones that are really special are the guys that have all the athletic ability, and then when the ball gets snapped, he sees the guard pull, he knows exactly where he's going, he gets there, and then he can win. I mean, on defense, one guy is designated to block you on that play. As an inside backer, it's a guard, a center, sometimes a tackle, but primarily a guard and a center. If you understand who's supposed to block you, where they're trying to get to, what gap you have, and then the ball gets snapped, boom, guard pulls, I go from the backside B gap to a frontside A gap. If it's a power play with the guard pulling, I know it's the guard in the center double teaming the 3 technique up to me. I got to get in the A gap right now. The guard's going to come off. If you know that, now you can play ahead of the play. That guy pulls, boom, I got to beat the guard. If I set him up here, boom, I can push the inside A gap and get to the football. I think the guys that are really good have the ability to do all of that once the ball gets snapped. Half of it's, can you get lined up? Do you know where you got to be? Then the second part is, when the ball gets snapped, I need to get there right now.
So we were having a conversation just prior to you walking in here, Luke, and we brought up Nick Martin at Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
Right? Undersized guy, 140 tackles, right? That doesn't happen on athleticism alone. To your point of aptitude, diagnosing, processing, and boom, 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 and it just becoming second nature. When that occurs, how much does that do to sheer preparation or maybe a God-given instinct that you can't coach, or a combination?
I think it's a combination. I think certain guys have better instincts than other guys, right? Yeah. But I think that you can, if you don't have great instincts, the more you prepare, the better you are. And then I think it goes the same thing with if you do have instincts, the more you watch, the more you absorb, it just takes it to a different level. So I think, when you think about instincts, it's feel. It's just peripheral feel. It's understanding what offenses are trying to do, how you fit within your defense. And I think when you really think about instincts, it's like, all right, sometimes I have to get over a block, but can I slip it and get there? Mm-hmm. The guys that understand how to take calculated risks, the guys that understand how to get to a point of attack when they have a bad angle, those are the guys that kind of bend the rules of football a little bit and can just get there more efficiently than other guys. There's certain guys that play like robots and maybe have to get over the top of a block. Mm-hmm. And that's what the book says. I'm going to go play by the book. And yes, you're doing what you've been coached to do, but you're not making a play on the football.
Right.
The guys that have instincts understand that, boom, I've seen this play before on tape. I can feel it. I understand what's going on. This is where the offensive lineman is. He's at a phase of the running back. I can shoot that gap and go underneath. Technically, watching tape, I'm wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
But the rule is always you better get there.
Yeah.
And if the guys that do that and take those calculated risks, the coaches eventually understand he's going to make more of them than he's not, and we got to live with that.
Yeah.
So I think guys like him have that understanding of the defense, have the understanding of what's going on, but they also trust themselves and trust that innate ability within themselves to just get to the football.
You did some college games this year, and one of the things we now see in college football that Luke and I have been covering for years, with all the player movement and the transfer portal, you can't really get too complex with your schemes. How does that impact the prospects who are now moving into far more complex schemes and defenses?
Yeah, I think it's a learning curve, and certainly for me when I got to Carolina, it was a learning curve, and it was a lot. When I was in college, I was kind of just, hey, line up like kind of here, and like this is where we need you to get to. Yeah. Versus when I got to Carolina, I remember lining up and doing run fits on trash cans. So we set up trash cans like they're the offense. Yeah. We get lined up, and then we got to fit the run. I had no idea, like, why I'm supposed to be aligned here, why that makes sense, where's my run gap technically.
How important is the why?
I think for me it was huge because if you're like, Luke, you're in the A gap, then it's just pure memorization.
Yeah.
Versus if it's, hey, Luke, you're in the A gap, you look to the right, it's Thomas Davis, and you look to the left, and it's John Beeson. There's 4 run gaps, so we'll say a B gap. We'll just say there's 3 of them, a B gap, an A gap, and then an outside D gap. How do you guys fit those 3 gaps? So obviously if you're in the inside, you've got the inside of the 3 gaps. If you're lined up on the outside, you're the outside of the 3 gaps. So for me, it's like, all right, I got a B gap, an A gap, and a D gap. All right, Thomas is here, Beast is here. If I just use my brain, I'd probably have the A gap. So like the why for me, it took a while, but I understood, all right, if I'm on the outside, say I was playing outside linebacker, and it's me, Beast, and Thomas. All right, we still have the same gaps, B gap, A gap, D gap. All right, well, Beast is in the A gap, so I'm obviously not in the A gap. Thomas is in the D gap. I'm obviously not there. What's the only one that's left? The B gap. So I think it's going to be a learning curve for all these guys. Yeah, they bounce around a lot. Maybe you could say it's good because they learn different systems, but there'll be a learning curve for all these guys, and that's the job of the coaches is to help these guys understand why they're doing things and why it's important to do it that way.
With the spread offense and how it's kind of impacted the National Football League now in terms of spreading you thin, putting you out in space. Now you got some of these undersized linebackers or guys that are a little bit lighter because they have to play in the open field, but then all of a sudden you start condensing, you start running at those guys. And Anish and I were talking about, kind of how Philadelphia is constructed now, and it's kind of coming back full circle. Well, if they can run and they're in space, what are they going to do if we put them into a phone booth? Mm-hmm. From a linebacker perspective, are we going to start to see the return of the thumper, the guy that can plug, stack, and shed, and just be a guy at the point of attack that's going to be a problem?
I think you guys have kind of nailed it. You look at the NFL, when I came in, it was bigger guys, more physical, Xander Ray Lewis and Urlacher, Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman were out in San Francisco. And then as my career progressed, it kind of went more to that, like you said, spread them out. Tight ends got smaller. They threw the ball more. And then as defenses get smaller, they match up better. Then the offenses have to make the decision, what are we going to do? And now it's starting to kind of come back around.
Yeah.
You look at
Baltimore.
You look at Baltimore, you look at Philly, you look at all these Shanahan systems that want to run the football. They just do a good job. So for me, I think you got to find a way to find guys that can cover.
Yeah.
Because they're still going to put, a little fast guy at the number 3 spot and say, hey, match up on the Mike Backer.
Yeah.
But I think what you have to do as a defensive coordinator is say, hey, what do we have? What are we working with? Hey, do we have big physical guys that can do everything? There's not a lot of them out there.
Sure.
Or do we have a big physical guy that plays in the run game, but he lacks in the pass game? How do we protect him? Or do you have a guy that's maybe a little bit smaller in the run game but plays well in the pass? You have to be okay with saying that if we have one of these small guys that's active, that can run around as a run and chase guy, covers really well, how do we protect him in the run game?
Yeah.
You can't ask a guy to do something because it fits your system when you know he can't do it.
Yeah.
So that's the job, I think, of the coaches is say, what do our pieces look like? How do they fit within our system? And how do we protect them? Yeah. And so, I don't think it matters. There's not one size fits all in the NFL. Yeah, you'd love to have Roquan and Levante and Bobby Wagner and guy Fred Warner.
Be nice, yeah.
But
right.
they're not out there. So how do we get by with what we have? How do we set up the defense so it benefits them and allows them to showcase their strengths? I think that's what good coaches are able to do.
Well, Luke, you hit on a couple of guys. We talked a little Jalen Walker, Schlesinger from UCLA. What about Demetrius Knight from South Carolina? I know you've watched him a little bit too.
Well, he's got great size. He's got great size, played in the SEC. He's one of the rare guys that ran out of the top 3 or 4 guys. Schlesinger didn't run. Jalen Walker didn't run. He ran like 4.58, plenty fast, big, strong, physical. Those are the type of guys that you like looking at. He's got all the tools physically. He played in the SEC, big-time college football. And then, again, the biggest thing I think you got to figure out is what's his personality like? Is he a number 1? Is he a number 2? Is he a thumper? Is he physical? How fast does he process? Does he make impact plays going downhill at the line of scrimmage? And the one thing that's good for all these guys that are going to come in, say we draft a guy, is Josie. The pressure's not on you to be the dude, right? Josie's going to have a dot. Josie's been around. He's been in the system a long time, dating back to when Ajero was in Denver.
Yeah.
So these guys can come in and just learn, and that's part of the job of Josie as the older guy. They're going to bring a guy in, right? Maybe in a year or two, he supplants you in some form or fashion, but Josie's competitor probably won't let that happen. But it's the job of the coaches, obviously. But as an older guy, now Josie is an older guy. It's his responsibility to come in and help these guys. So there's a couple guys, and I think Demetrius Knight is one of those guys that come in that checks a lot of boxes for us. And then how well does he pick our system up and go play?
Another guy, Jihad Campbell, out of Alabama, great size as well. Interesting evolution with him, too, because he started off as really a special teams phenom.
Yeah.
Wasn't an every down guy, then developed into that. So if you're looking at mid to late round and at the linebacker spot, or round 3 or beyond, how much does teams come into play?
I think it's huge. I think when you draft a guy, 3rd through 5th, 6th, 7th round, it gives those guys an opportunity to have an impact on the team and develop at the same time. So they don't just come in and get pushed to the curb and you get some reps in training camp and the OTAs, and then once the regular season starts, you don't play on teams, and all you do is practice. You're the look squad.
Yeah.
So only work you really get is an individual period and a little bit on the look squad. Mm-hmm. But guys that can come in and have an impact on teams, then they get real action. They get in there. They get to feel the game, and then as time progresses, if they're smart, they start to add value as an on-the-ball linebacker. Very similar to what we got with A.J. Klein back in 2013. Yeah. We drafted him out of Iowa State. He had all the tools. He had everything, right? So, and it was Chase Blackburn, Thomas, and I. So there wasn't a ton of room, but A.J. was a monster on special teams and probably could have started on a majority of the teams in the NFL, but we were in a good shape at linebacker. And then as time went on, A.J.'s second year, now he was playing a lot more. He played all 3 linebacker spots, but still super effective on special teams. So he was a great luxury for us. And then ultimately, A.J. played 10 years, started a ton of games. But it was exactly what you said. I think A.J. might have been a 5th-round pick. Brought him in, played a ton on special teams, learned a lot, very smart. And then when his opportunity got called, he played extremely well.
Awesome.
The last piece of this, Luke, is the interconnectivity on defense.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw this year that having a beat-up, injured, depleted front, that impacts the back end of the defense. Mm-hmm. So looking at the front 7 holistically, where, yes, it's an area to improve and to upgrade, from your position and your experience playing inside linebacker, explain how that group right there kind of fits and plays off of what happens right on the defensive line.
So I think, you look at my career, right? My rookie year, we brought a guy in at the end of training camp his name was Dwan Edwards. Veteran guy, played in Buffalo and then in Baltimore. Really good player, great dude.
He is a great dude.
Great dude.
I live in Weddington, so he's
the best dude ever.
Yeah.
But he could play through technique, he could play shade, super unselfish, right? So my rookie year, I got to deal with him. He was great. And then my second year, we drafted Star Lotulelei in the first round. He somehow fell to 15. He had like a heart issue that was misdiagnosed at the combine, so it was awesome. And then we drafted K'Wan Short in the second round.
Yeah.
And they built these three guys in front of us that were just monsters. Big, physical. They were all a little bit different, and they made our life really easy. I mean, it's super easy. They got to block those big guys first before they get up to us.
Absolutely.
So if it's a double team and you slip, and those guys slip off a double team, the double team falls apart to get up to the second level. Star and KK are just mauling guys in the backfield, and Thomas and I have no work, right? Which is phenomenal. Versus, last year, Derek Brown gets hurt, and then we're just banged up. And when that front level is getting moved and they're getting pushed into your lap, life gets really hard. So, you look at us on the front. Last year was not what we wanted, right? But if you look at it, Jadeveon showed up, played well. When Wanham came back,
bit difference maker,
phenomenal,
yeah,
phenomenal. A'Shawn Robinson played really well, and then Derek Brown, like Derek Brown's a first round. He's a top 5 pick. If Derek Brown's coming out this year, he's top 5 pick, right? We get him back for nothing. He's on our team, which is great. So now you trot out to start the season healthy Jadeveon, healthy Wanham, A'Shawn's healthy, he's back. Derek Brown, like now you got some dudes, and then now you're going to go. Maybe you pick a guy up in free agency. Some guys have gotten cut. Then where does that put you for the draft? Mason Graham, we talked about. The other guy, Walter Nolan. I think he's a Mississippi State guy.
Ole Miss.
Ole Miss. Just big, physical, active, slippery. So now you go from no one to, if I'm playing linebacker and it's Jadeveon Clowney, DJ Wanham, A'Shawn Robinson, number 95. Thank God he's back. And then one of these dudes we just talked about. Yeah. You're like, okay, all right, we got some dudes now.
Get some people off.
And it's amazing how quickly that can happen. You look at Philly. Philly was phenomenal this year on defense. Last year they were terrible.
Right.
They add some pieces. They get some dudes growing up. They draft some guys. Boom. Now they're unbelievable. Right. So, we were bad. We were bad last year on defense. There was a lot of reasons why we were bad. Injuries, lack of depth. We weren't very good up front. But now you start to kind of look at our team. We're in way better shape.
Yeah, and again, I think part of that you got to remember. Dan Morgan's calculus a year ago was we got to invest some resources into the offense to find out what you have in Bryce Young. And by season's end, I think we were all pretty satisfied with what we saw in Bryce Young and what we have in Bryce Young. So defensively, you were banking on health. You didn't get that. Now you turn to your depth. You didn't have that either. That was sort of the gamble. Now you're, again, year 2 into this process with this regime. You got the draft. You got free agency to address those needs on defense. And, I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anybody. The front seven, much like the offensive line a year ago, the front seven's getting addressed.
Yeah, and, you look at the front seven from our guys on offense last year. Bryce got, was it 52 or 62 times?
It was 60 plus his rookie year.
Yeah, so 60, whatever it was, a lot. And then they go pay those 2 big guards. Those guys are monsters. Taylor Moton and Icky had a lot better year last year. And then the question mark has always been, what are we doing at center? Sign Corbett back, and then sign Cade Mays back. So 2 guys that we were very happy with how they played, and now we'll have a good battle inside at that center spot. I think Austin Corbett coming back is just a solid foundation to that offensive line. I think that
gives you some depth and protection to it guard.
Yeah, it just helps, like you said, swing, move. Obviously got those guys taken care of. Now we can just go do some stuff on defense a little bit.
See how he smiled?
Yeah. Hey.
Defensive guy.
Just go get some big guys.
Pressure burst the pipe.
That's right.
The great Luke Kuechly. Thanks, Luke.
Yep.